Hey everyone, welcome back to DEMOPOD, the Demolition Podcast with Ax Smash. I'm your host, Ryan Maher, and we are here with episode number 5.
5!
As the late, great King Kong Bundy would do, 5! And here we are, episode 5. Guys, how you doing? We're recording this now, your first weekend off in a very long time. You feeling rested? You got reserve strength? You ready to go?
Oh, we don't know what to do, to be honest with you, but we're happy to be off.
It is nice to be home and not have to get on a plane, that's for sure, especially through Newark.
Oh, please don't even. We were talking a little bit for those that are listening. We were talking before we started recording tonight about what a disaster it is here in New Jersey, especially at Newark Airport, and how it's screwing lots of things up for people that are coming in and out, but especially coming back. It's been a nightmare if you're flying into Newark, and hopefully by the time this airs in the next couple weeks or so, that situation is cleared up. But you guys did have a weekend off after a crazy schedule. You were in, of course, Las Vegas for WrestleCon and the WrestleMania festivities. And then you had back-to-back weekends in Canada. I know you're going to be going back to Canada next month for Tommy Fierro's 80s Wrestling Con. We'll talk more about that later. But you had the weekend off. Did you get to enjoy the Mother's Day festivities with your wives and have a good time?
Yes, that was very nice.
Yep, definitely. Definitely. It was a good time.
Good stuff. Well, we're going to get right down to business. And this is an episode that I feel has been requested from when we first announced we were going to be doing this. And it's one that we have to get to because he is such a huge part of the Demolition legacy. And of course, we're talking about Mr. Harry Fujiwara, better known as Mr. Fuji, aka Master Fuji. And as you guys dubbed him at one point, Fuge, the Stooge. And the interesting thing about Mr. Fuji, as we record this in 2025, there's a lot of information that's out there. Some of it's folklore. Some of it, maybe a little mixed up. They talk a lot about his backstage shenanigans, ribs, pranks. Not so much information out there nowadays that's readily accessible about his in-ring career. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But when was the first time both of you gentlemen actually met Mr. Fuji? Was it when he was replacing Johnny Valiant as your manager, or did you already have some kind of a relationship with him established?
Well, I had met Fuji years before that, when I was in and out of New York before. And in a brief period of time when he came into the Mid-Atlantic area, or maybe it was Georgia. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was probably eight or so years before I was in New York with the Demolition.
So you already knew a little bit about what he was like as a person. What about you, Barry? Did you know Mr. Fuji prior to working with him?
No, I first met Fuji when I first came up to the WWF at that time. And he knew I was friends with Curt Hennig, and he met Curt Hennig before. And I suppose he knew Curt through Larry when Curt was a young kid. So right away, I kind of had a good rapport with him, thank God.
And I love how you say thank God, and you mentioned Curt Hennig in the same breath, because Curt Hennig, one of my all-time favorite professional wrestlers, but also someone that I learned years later, a legendary ribber and prankster himself. So I can only imagine some of the hijinks that went on, or some of the things that were planned between Mr. Fuji and Curt Hennig. But before we get into all that stuff, he was born in 1934 in Honolulu, Hawaii. I think he did such a masterful job of portraying that character from Osaka, Japan. A lot of people don't even realize that he actually was an American citizen of Japanese and Hawaiian ancestry.
Well, Fuji was he was a professional. I mean, when I first met him, like I said, he was wrestling, and he already had a very good and long career and successful career. And I believe at that time he was it Professor Tanaka he was tagged up with in the New York area. And I know that they won the belt at least 2 times, probably more than that, and very successful.
Yeah, so in WWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, throughout, I believe when he started in 1972 and he went back in 1980, he actually, Mr. Fuji himself, was a 5-time world tag team champion. And I believe it was 3 times with Professor Tanaka and twice with Mr. Saito. And again, if I have my information wrong, I know they're going to correct me in the comments, but quite an accomplished tag team wrestler. And I know that that played a huge role in his mentorship of you two gentlemen as a team.
Yeah, and I didn't even know, a lot of that. I just remember seeing him in magazines and everything. And then when we were in LA, then he introduced us or me to Professor Tanaka, and then he started telling me some stories about. That's when I really learned about Fuji a lot, was through Professor Tanaka.
Yeah, I remember Tanaka, and one of the things that stands out about him is not only was he a good professional wrestler and very successful, I think he saved somebody at one time from on a plane or something like that. Did that come up?
That this is news to me. There is a plane story I was going to get to involving Mr. Fuji, but it certainly does not involve him saving anybody.
Yeah, if I'm not, and there again, the fans know more than we do on these things, but I think somebody tried to do something dastardly on an airplane, and Tanaka either knocked him out or subdued him or whatever. But that's when I recognized his name, and when I recognized that, he was somebody special.
Well, then he was in the James Bond movie too.
No, that wasn't him though.
Wasn't Tanaka?
No. There was a name Tanaka, I believe, but that wasn't him. No.
Yeah, I remember a number of years ago, Roddy Piper, before his passing, did a shoot interview where he made that same statement and he was corrected on it. But I think they had a little bit of fun playing around with that. And getting back to the whole James Bond thing. So Mr. Fuji goes on from this successful in-ring career, and now he takes on the role of a manager, and he legitimately looks like Oddjob, the James Bond villain. How much of that was Mr. Fuji's creation on his own, or is that The Office? Is that an agent or Vince himself saying, okay, we want you to portray this character? How much of a hands-on role did he have in creating his managerial persona?
I really don't remember if it was his input. I would estimate, just from our knowledge, I think that probably was Vince's idea, tying into the movie, as a matter of fact. But I don't know him. Do you know, Barry?
No, I don't know, but I do know that once he became our manager and Vince wanted him to put paint on his face, Fuji did not want that. And, we were talking earlier too that, maybe that was kind of a rib to Fuji that he had to put paint on every night. It was Vince ribbing him. But, he was a trooper. He put the paint on every night, just like we did.
Yeah, you're actually answering a question that I was going to get to, and it's perfect timing because I did notice that in some of the Demolition promos, he would have the paint. Other times he would not, but most of the time he did. And so I could imagine. Now, was that something that he applied himself, or would you have to help him paint the face?
Yeah, he applied it himself. And, if you know Fuji, it was just something that he did not want to do. He had his... everything he did, he had set up. If it was 5 o'clock, you had to leave. He was down there at 4:45, ready to go. And everything was just in line how he did it. So for him to paint his face, that was like a whole thing that didn't, he couldn't comprehend doing that before matches all the time. So it really was a hard thing for him to do.
I could only imagine too what it was like for him and Tanaka, and then eventually Saito as well. And even as he carried on as a manager, because after you guys, he wound up managing Yokozuna to 2 WWE World Championships, as well as a World Tag Team Championship with Owen Hart. But he always portrayed that Japanese stereotype. And while looking at doing some research for this episode, I went on YouTube last night and I just typed in Mr. Fuji. And again, there wasn't as many videos as I would have liked to have seen, but there were some gems. And I realized just how much that stereotype was played in. And we all know that WWE does this. We saw it with Sergeant Slaughter becoming the Iraqi sympathizer and, the Iron Sheik, all these things. They always take whatever foreign conflict is going on and they play it up on television. But watching some of these old Mr. Fuji promos, one was from 1978 with Classy Freddie Blassie, and he's about to take on Bob Backlund. And Freddie Blassie's just standing there going, yeah, Backlund, watch out, the kamikaze, and saying all of these things that I can't even imagine the uproar that would take place with some of this stuff in current times or even over the last 15 years. I mean, do you think that he just understood that it was all business? Did he enjoy portraying that stereotype of everything that was quote unquote bad about being Japanese?
Well, I think that, like I said, he was a professional and a consummate professional in the fact that if that was his character, he was going to live that character.
Yeah.
And it's part of his heritage anyway. And if he's going to be a heel, you might as well be the heel part.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the parallels are amazing because then I even look at Barry's career as Crusher Khrushchev and working with Nikita and Ivan Koloff. And, I remember hosting Nikita for a virtual signing, and he was talking about how Ivan had him getting Russian propaganda magazines delivered to his house so that the mailman would even think that Nikita was legit. And I just can't imagine the preparation that goes into having to live your life on the road like that and being that anti-American heel character. If anything, I think it would put more of a target on your back, but luckily he had you guys there to protect him. Did you ever see any situations where fans wanted to get at Mr. Fuji while you were under his employ?
Not to the point it was dangerous. I mean, they disliked him and they thought he was devious and sneaky and underhanded, but there was no, I never felt, and maybe Barry did, but I never felt that they were coming after him or coming after us to harm us because of, other than the fact that they didn't like us. I think they respected us, but didn't like us.
And by this time too, it was already claimed that it was entertainment business. So it wasn't as realistic as it was, 5, 6, 7 years before that too. So people would get mad when he'd throw the salt in their face and everything and, throw some cups at them or something, but it wasn't that big of a deal where, back in the old days, and Bill, we told a lot of stories where people jump in the ring and, come after you with knives and all. It wasn't that anymore,
Yeah, and I'm sure he encountered some craziness, and unfortunately, he passed away in 2016. So, we don't get to hear his version of events. But when you just look at the rundown of his career that I have here, he was in WWE from 1972 to 74. Then he went to Mid-Atlantic in Georgia, which Bill had mentioned. He was there 74 to 75. California and Texas, back to WWE. Back doing another run, working for Don Owens, going to Puerto Rico, NWA New Zealand, Canada, and then his final run in WWE, which went on from 1981 to 1996. So this guy literally went everywhere, all around every territory. And my question is that when he was about to become your manager, my understanding of the WWE during that time period were that a lot of these managers were old wrestlers that Vince McMahon Sr. felt a bond and a kinship with and respected and appreciated their loyalty and wanted to give them jobs. Is that kind of what Mr. Fuji fell under as well? Because he was not the best mouthpiece for getting over a talent, right? So was it just one of those things where, wow, well, Mr. Fuji has this reputation as being a devious heel. Whoever we put him with is instantly going to be made to be looked at the same way.
Well, I would think so. That's a nice gesture on Senior's part, and I really do appreciate that because there's a lot of promoters that wouldn't have done that. Doesn't matter how much you contributed or how much money you brought in for them. So to hear that gives me another mark that I can put as a plus for Senior. Yeah, Fuji, I mean, like you said, you mentioned it, all the time he was there and all the time he was in the business all over the country and successful in all those spots. So I'm glad to hear that. That warms my heart for Senior.
Yeah, and for Vince Jr. to keep him on for that same reason. But when you look at it too, Fuji was in the business for so long and he had a name. So if he couldn't get in the ring anymore, it did benefit wrestling to have him somewhere involved. And for the Demolition to come up there, nobody who knew who we were, to have Fuji, who they knew was vicious in his day, and come to be our manager. I think that's what really, really helped the Demolition out too, to become bad guys. You know, to have Fuji in your corner.
And
Absolutely.
all of his experience, I mean, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure. All of his experience, we would try to be like sponges, because you can never learn too much. So it doesn't matter what territory he was in, he experienced something different, and to transfer that to us helped us out.
You know, Bill, I really respect you, and one of the reasons, you know, I've always said, every territory you go to, you learn something from somebody. And you know, it's like when I got up there, I was the young boy, and I was like a sponge picking up everything from you. And it's neat to hear you say that you were a sponge picking it up from him. And Fuji was probably a sponge picking it up from somebody else. But that's the wrestling business. That's huge.
Yeah, it's often said you copy good things, you don't copy failures.
Right.
So
it's an interesting point that you guys bring up, because now one of the things that you hear from a lot of these different talents from that era that have podcasts that go back, and I'm sure now that you guys have the WWE Legends deal and you're under that umbrella, you're going to see a lot more of it too. One of the things that you hear nowadays is that a lot of the talent has tour buses and they kind of keep to themselves. They have their own thing going on. And you got to wonder what that means for the future of the business, because it's not that same dynamic that you guys had where you literally were in the car with him, on the planes with him. From what I understand, we talked about in the first episode, didn't he even book and handle your hotels and rental cars? I mean, he was a legit manager for you guys, aside from giving off that ring expertise. He really was running stuff.
no, he didn't book the hotels, or Barry would book the hotels or cars, or I would book the hotels or cars, and Fuji would take care of the restaurants.
Okay.
Which were always Chinese.
We ate at every Chinese restaurant at every city all over the world, and that was Fuji.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the funny thing was, and the sad thing, I think we mentioned it, we probably will again. The last time we were with him, he didn't recognize us. He had dementia or stages of it all. And we were talking about all the Chinese restaurants, and his boy told us, well, he doesn't eat Chinese food anymore. He hates it. So
he was probably ripping us for all those years.
Yeah.
That's
but he was a manager in respect, and we talked about this as we were traveling. He would constructively critique our match, and it wasn't to tear it down. It was to tell us, if this did well, continue to do that. Maybe you need to tweak this, or don't do that. It didn't work out well, or let's not do that at all. So he was working towards the match as well. And like we've mentioned many, many times, Barry and mine and Fuji's objective was always to have the best match that night on the card. And sometimes we were successful, sometimes we weren't, but that didn't mean we weren't going to try the next night to be the best match on the card.
One of the greatest things riding in the car was, you know, you'd get out of the building at 11 o'clock at night, you'd have a 200-mile ride to wherever you got to go. And Fuji would be in the back seat, and Bill would be driving, or I would be driving, and we'd be talking about these matches and the matches coming up. And that's where Fuji would critique it. And he would say, hey, you know, that looked like shit. You know, what'd you do that for? Don't do that anymore. Do this. And we would say, yeah, good. Because it's hard when you're in the ring doing what you're doing. You don't see what's going on. And Fuji could see that. And it was great.
And we're going to talk more about it in the next episode as well, because our next episode, we're going to go a little bit more behind the scenes, talk more about the roles of agents and producers and whatnot. But I was always curious when it comes to the promos that involved you guys being managed by Mr. Fuji, because both of you men, I, in my opinion, think cut great promos for what you did. I mean, Barry as Blacktop Bully and Repo Man, little bit of differences, but that's still same high energy. And then as far as Bill is concerned, what I found very interesting was I watched some old Mass Superstar promos where it kind of reminded me almost of like a Nick Bockwinkel, very kind of quiet, soft-spoken, articulate, drawing the person in. Then the two of you together as Demolition, both loud, boisterous, high energy. We're going to come kick your stinking teeth in. And then Mr. Fuji just with the holding of the hand or the, yes, my Demolition. Was that by design too? Did you guys plan out promos like, okay, you're going to take the first 10 seconds, Barry, Bill's going to take the next 10, Fuji's going to come in, or did you guys just get in front of a camera and ran with it?
No, we always knew that our opponents, the town, the little things that you need to know, what time that, whatever, the building sometimes. And yeah, sometimes I would say Barry wants to start, and sometimes I'd want to start. And Fuji was always in the background.
Mm-hmm.
One, he never felt comfortable during interviews. So there wasn't a need for us. Like you said, both of us were comfortable doing our own interviews. So we blended together quickly and easily. And Fuji sometimes would want to interject something. So we'd let him do that. So there was never qualms and arguments over who was going to do what.
On an interview day, you might end up doing 20 interviews, and you're in a room with the camera and the camera people, and then usually there's a couple of wrestlers sitting there, and Vince would come up and say it was for, Atlanta, Georgia. Then Vince would, say a little bit of a spiel, Atlanta, Georgia, whatever, and then we would take whatever he would say, and then we'd, run with it however we wanted to. And we were always doing things in one take. And that was kind of what our thing was. And sometimes it was hard because you're out in the, in the arena for hours and hours waiting to get in there. And you might see somebody that was in there for an hour and a half. It's like, well, holy cow, it took them an hour and a half to do, 15 interviews. Well, then we'd go in and 15 minutes later, we'd be coming out. And I think Fuji, he really didn't want to get into that, trying to remember what town and who you're with and all that. It was more for Fuji, and he wanted Bill and I to do the Demolition part.
Yeah.
And they were different interviews at that time too. Like Barry said, we could basically say what we wanted to. Now it's scripted, and I don't know when that started after we were there, where you had to memorize what you were going to say, and a lot of the guys they'd leave out something or this or that, and then Vince or whoever was in charge of it would jump all over their back, and then you forget something else, and you're in there for 5, 6, 7 takes. Our gimmick was one take and we're out.
Yeah.
And just let us do, you have to be that person. You get writers that are writing promos for 15 different guys. Well, they can't be those 15 different people. They can be one. So the person that's doing the interview should create his own aura and his own atmosphere. It's changed considerably.
It really has. And, it's interesting to hear you guys say that Mr. Fuji himself was not really comfortable with the whole interview process, because years later, when he wound up managing Yokozuna, after a short while, I want to say about a year into that run, they brought in Jim Cornette as the quote unquote American spokesperson. So Fuji was still active at ringside, but now they added Cornette with a whole other layer. But, it is funny to look back on some of those promos. I mean, I remember Mr. Fuji was on Conan O'Brien with Yokozuna, and there was a very funny line where he was talking about The Undertaker and The Undertaker's manager, Paul Burial. And it was just so funny. And it brings me back to the days of Fuji Vice with Don Morocco, where there's a super viral clip from that episode of Tuesday Night Titans where, why don't you try something tropical? And then Gene Okerlund and Lord Alfred Hayes losing their minds. How often did Fuji just come out with these things specifically to pop the boys? I got the vibe that he knew he was being ribbed in a lot of these situations, and he just said, the hell with it, I'm going to run with it.
Well, I think he had a very good sense of humor, and he was aware of what was going on. And he was, he liked to pull ribs on people. He never pulled any ribs on us that I can recall. Maybe it was so clever that I didn't pick it up. But I think we always say that I think he knew where his bread was buttered.
Yeah.
So he, do something
he,
someplace else?
he did rib me one time though, Bill. And
Oh.
I don't know if I told you, but back to the interview deal. Fuji was more. I thought he got over more by not speaking a lot too, and he knew that. It wasn't that he couldn't do a promo, but he would. His emphasis was us, not him, and that's how we made it. So he would think that the more we talk, it'd be getting us over. We don't want to get Fuji over.
And that's how it should be as a manager. And, that was the problem with the setup of Johnny Valiant in the beginning, was that he was kind of making it about him, whereas Fuji just blended into the background and added to it very nicely. But Barry, I'm not letting you off the hook. We have to hear about the rib that Fuji.
Yeah, me too.
It wasn't a bad rib, but it was. We were in Europe, and you know how tired you get over there. And I'm one guy that I need to get some sleep, but we were up for 2-3 days and wrestling and training and travel and everything. And I remember it was you, me, and I think Sherry Martel and Fuji. And I was just talking about how tired I was, and I think I was getting sick. And Fuji kind of got sick of me saying how tired I was, because everybody's tired. So we got a plane flight. It was like at 6 a.m. or something, and we finally had a chance to go to bed. Well, he knew what my room number was, and he gave me a wake-up call every hour on the hour.
Oh my God.
And I knew right away it was Fuji. And I called down to the front desk. I said, don't let anybody call me, but I needed a wake-up call, so I had to have the phone on. And so they said, no, we're not going to let anybody. Well, he knew the room number, so he'd go down the hallway, and then he'd call. So the phone rings. So I got up in the morning and I went, God, what a great night's sleep. I didn't want to put it over, because if you put it over, that's going to happen every night.
Yeah.
But I knew it was him. So I thought, well, I can't rib him back, because this is going to get really serious if you rib him back. So I did what you're not supposed to do, is I called him at home at 4 o'clock in the morning, wake up call, and then I hung up. Nice. I did that about 3 or 4 days in a row. And
you think he ever put 2 and 2 together?
What's that?
You think he ever put 2 and 2 together, that it was you getting your revenge?
I think he knew it was me, but I never put it over. And he never said anything, and I never got ribbed from him again either.
Wow.
So that was the rib he pulled on me.
And Bill, you never had anything pulled on you then? That's fantastic.
No, maybe I was too boring. I don't know.
Well, I love that Barry said, I was very cautious about ribbing him back, because I knew that, more was going to follow. Larry Zbyszko, who I've gotten to know a little bit over the years, and Larry's a storyteller. He's a very colorful guy, but he always said that was the belief about Fuji. And I remember asking Larry years ago, like, how did nobody ever wind up just losing their shit and trying to beat him up or whatever? And they were like, because we knew that no matter what happened, he would get you back. And some of the stories that Larry talked about would be, a guy would fall asleep on a bench or on a table, and Fuji would wrap white tape around their boot and let the white tape hang, and then he would set it on fire so that the guy would have to wake up and stomp out the fire.
Oh my God.
Things of that nature. Some of the ribs are a little more sinister. There's one that I have to ask about, because it's part of wrestling folklore at this point. And the reason it's part of folklore is because you hear many different versions of the story. And it dates back to an episode of Monday Night Raw in the late 90s, and it was a feud involving the Big Boss Man and Al Snow. And it was over a dog that Al Snow owned named Pepper. And Big Boss Man and Al Snow were having this feud, and Boss Man wants to make amends with Snow, invites him over to the hotel to prepare him dinner. And as Al is eating the beef, he finds out that it is his beloved dog Pepper that he is being served. And Al Snow went on to say that storyline was created from a rib that Mr. Fuji had committed. But I've heard different versions. I've heard that it was a neighbor's dog that he didn't like.
Adnan Casey.
See, I've heard Adnan Casey. I've also heard Tanaka, but it was General Adnan Al Casey.
So yeah, they had heat, and I don't know what had transpired, but I think that something when they were together in Minneapolis or something like that.
Okay.
And did you ever hear what the reasoning was, Barry? But it was against Adnan Casey.
Yeah, the story I heard was Fuji used to bring a bag lunch with him, and he made his own sandwich. And Fuji could cook, so it was good sandwiches. So he went and picked up Adnan, and Adnan goes over, takes it, and starts eating the sandwich. And Fuji got pissed. He said, "Don't, I mean, they got mad." So, anyways, it went on another day. Adnan did it again. He did it 2 or 3 times, ate his lunch. So then Fuji says, "Okay, I'm going to fix this son of a gun." So he went over and got his dog, cooked his dog up, had the bag lunch sitting right there. Adnan started eating the sandwich, and Fuji goes, "Hey, how do you like that?" And he goes, "God," I said, "What is it? This is really delicious." He goes, "It's your dog."
Oh,
And I heard Adnan threw up.
of course.
That's the story I heard.
And I'm imagining that that heat probably went on for a number of years after that. I don't think that's something that you really get over. But I'm glad you guys cleared that up, because over the years, just through hearsay and various shoot interviews, different wrestlers have attributed a version of that story to different people. But General Adnan El-Casey, Billy White Wolf,
Yeah.
I've heard numerous times that he was the victim of that. There was also a story I heard about M80s under a car hood, and there were a couple different victims of that as well.
SD Jones.
Poor SD, the most likable guy. What did SD do to upset Mr. Fuji?
I don't know what he did, but the story was that Fuji had four, 5, or 6 M80s, and he taped them to the engine of SD's car, closed the hood, and of course they're going down the highway, and as it heats up, the M80s all blew up and blew the hood off the car. So I don't know what had transpired, or Fuji just did it to see the reaction or what, but yeah, that was Fuji told us that story there for a fact.
But no, Fuji, when he was with us, he kind of was over all the serious ribs.
Yeah, I mean, really, come on, guys.
What he did was he kind of sent the Bulldogs and Kurt Hennig through the Fuji school of ribs. So they were kind of doing the ribs for Fuji, I think, is kind of what it was.
Yeah, he was the teacher. They were the 2 pupils.
Yep.
Well, because when you hear about ribs, the names that usually do come to mind, for the mean ones, it's usually Mr. Fuji and Dynamite Kid. And then for some of the ones that really made the boys happy, you hear Kurt Hennig and Owen Hart, who, I'm finding out now the connection between Kurt and Mr. Fuji. Of course, Owen had a connection. He was managed by him on TV for a little bit there. So it is cool to see how the tutelage gets passed on. Did he ever try to recruit you guys for any ribs? I'm not asking you to admit if you took part in any, but was there ever a long car ride where he said, "Hey, I want to get so-and-so and Ax and Smash, I need you"?
Nope, never. Because we
never did. I mean, we heard all these things that had transpired and all the stories about Fuji, but when he was around us, I mean, he was calm, collected, and down to earth.
I have to ask about the infamous Survivor Series 1988 double turn. I think we covered it a little bit briefly. We glossed over it in our introduction episode because it is such a huge part of the Demolition legacy. As far as I know, the first double turn to take place on major television pay-per-view. Demolition's getting cheered with Mr. Fuji in their corner. You guys are already the tag team champions, which I think made the turn even more surprising because back then, especially the way managers were portrayed, they were always chasing clients that could bring them gold. And so now Mr. Fuji has the tag team champions under his tutelage, but he turns on them and goes off with their arch nemesis, the Warlord and Barbarian, the Powers of Pain. And in an interview afterwards, he states that ever since you guys, meaning you as Demolition, won the tag team titles, you weren't listening to them, and that the Powers of Pain would be loyal subjects. When did that decision get made by the office or whomever was in charge, the booker, Vince, whomever, to pull that trigger and remove Mr. Fuji from you guys and put him over into the Powers of Pain? Did you know that was coming for a couple weeks on? Were there some rumblings, or was it like a day of situation? Hey guys, we're going with a switch.
If I remember correctly, and Barry can correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't hear about it till the evening just before the match went on.
Wow.
There again, we talked about this. I think that the people that make the decisions listen to the crowd and the people liked us. They were cheering for us, but it wasn't because we were good guys. I think they were cheering for us when the music set and we came to the ring. They knew something was going to happen, and they respected us. And I think that the office got confused. Well, they're cheering for them. They like them. We have to turn them good guys, and they didn't.
As you get the information that that's going to happen, as just a performer, is there a part of you that, whether you share it with Vince or the office or whatever, that's irrelevant, but do you get a feeling of, oh man, I hope this is the right call? You're finding out the evening on a pay-per-view that they're taking away your manager that helped, you guys achieve the success that you had, was a part of the package. Now you find out that a switch is being made. Obviously, there's going to be a built-in storyline with the Powers of Pain, but is there anything that enters your mind like, oh man, I hope this is the right move? Or do you just go, okay, let's roll with it and see what happens?
I think mainly it was, we were kind of excited about it. It's like, well, we're losing Fuji, who we've traveled with forever, but, now we get to work against him, and we knew what kind of guy Fuji was. So, you just kind of accept it and hope everything goes your way. But by doing that, becoming baby faces, we knew we were going to get a run like that, even though we didn't work like baby faces. So, it was good. It was a good move.
Yeah, and we weren't apprehensive about doing it because we had good matches with the Powers of Pain. And at that time, and it wasn't that they had just come in not too long before that. So I think that they were going to get a bump up having Fuji as their manager. And then here we go. And Fuji was the sinister guy that turned on his guys. So we're going to get some revenge and go after him. So it just enhanced the rivalry.
Yeah, and I also felt that it actually helped your guys' eventual turn back to being heels because, the transition occurred because Mr. Fuji turned on you. And up until recently, I used to say the same thing about Randy Orton, currently on WWE TV, because Randy Orton now is slapping hands and doing all the babyface stuff. But for the longest time, over the last 20 years, he wasn't doing that. He may have been in a role where he was a face, but he wasn't embracing all those babyface qualities. He wasn't working like a babyface. And with you guys, you got to continue working like heels in many ways with the brawling style and whatnot. But you were loved because of the cool music, the face paint, and the bad guy manager turned on you. But you still got to authentically be Demolition. So that's what was interesting about the turn. It's not like they went, oh, okay, Demolition's good guys now. Let's change their outfits. Let's make them colorful or whatever. You still got to be the ass-kicking guys. And I thought that was pretty cool, the way that whole double turn got pulled off.
Well, I learned that years ago early in my career when I was doing the Mass Superstar, and George Scott had made the switch, and I went from a real sinister heel, burning people's eyes, to switching and becoming a fan favorite. He said, "Don't change your style. They're going to like you because now." After all you've done in your history of your career, you're on our side now, and we respect you. And that's how Barry and I looked at it. We're not going to go out and do hip tosses and drop kicks and all kind of slick moves. That's not what we were. We were just going to take our seriousness and come out of the other dressing room.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And then I have to ask, because one of the things that I had trouble with in my research here was finding out exactly how Mr. Fuji wound up back with you guys, because, you go on to have the feud with the Colossal Connection. We talked about it on the last episode in our Andre the Giant stories, or actually, I believe that was 2 episodes ago now. But we have the feud with the Colossal Connection. WrestleMania 6, you win the tag team championships back. SummerSlam 1990, in my opinion, one of the greatest tag team matches in WWE television. You guys against the Hart Foundation, you lose the tag team titles back. You're full-fledged heels. Now we have Crush in the mix, which that's going to be its own episode on its own with everything that went on there. But I couldn't really remember how Mr. Fuji wound up back in the fold. Bill, was that after you had left and he was just with Smash and Crush, or was Mr. Fuji back when you were still a part of the trio of Demolition?
I don't remember. That might have been Barry and Crush.
Okay.
Right, Barry?
Yeah, and I can't really remember all that stuff that happened there, but I don't know how it got back together.
Mhm.
It just, it was one of those things,
Well, it's very interesting because Tommy Fierro, the manager of you guys, and Tommy Fierro runs 80s Wrestling Con, 90s Wrestling Con, ISPW Wrestling. He also runs the very popular 80s Wrestling Instagram page, which if you follow Demolition Pod on Instagram, Search and Destroy You, Ryan Marr Comedy, you'll see a lot of the 80s wrestling pages. They posted a very interesting video today, and maybe in post-production, Dan can throw it up. It's from October of 1990. And this was not a post that Tommy or 80s Wrestling curated. They took it from another podcaster, but they're showing a clip of Demolition under hoods against the Legion of Doom in October 1990. And it was a dark match at a taping of Saturday night's main event. And basically the person doing the voiceover in this podcast clip was like, we didn't even know if this was Smash, Axe, and Crush or three random guys under hoods. What was the deal with that? Do you guys remember ever doing anything where you kept hoods on for the entire match? Was that?
Yeah, it was a horrible suggestion that was given to us by the office. And there again, Barry has mentioned it many times. They were trying to destroy Demolition.
Mhm.
They had powers. Legion of Doom had come in, and for some reason, they just wanted to destroy us. So, instead of the paint, put the hoods on. Do this, do that, and it was a horrible, demeaning. They thought it was going to be a ruination of us, and all it did was piss us off. To be honest with you.
Yeah, it was the worst thing ever. And I know it was, you got the Road Warriors are, the top team everywhere. I mean, they were incredible. And here's the Demolition in the WWF, and we're over big time up there. Well, the fans in the WWF, they don't even know what goes on in, the NWA or anything.
You're
And
right. Most of them don't. You're right.
and the office is thinking, oh, these Road Warriors are going to come up here and they're going to be the biggest baby faces of all times. Well, they weren't. We were getting bigger pops than they were. So they had to do everything they could to try to destroy us. And by putting those masks on, they were not just destroying the team, but they were destroying us personally. I mean, it was terrible. It was, they didn't fit. They were miserable, and it wasn't good at all.
Now,
I think we only had one or two matches with them because we just refused to do it.
Well, yeah, I remember I went into Vince and I said, Vince, I am not wearing this freaking mask. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life.
You answered the question before I asked it. I was going to wonder, how long that went on for, but also I was going to ask if when they presented it to you, if you raised a stink and said anything about it, because by that point, you guys already had one hell of a run. I mean, you were already multiple time tag team champions and you had been there for a couple of years on top. So I would have thought that maybe by that point you would have had a little bit of say into what went on. But that was another question I had about your relationship with Mr. Fuji on those car rides or in the hotels. Was there ever anything that he talked you out of? Was there ever any situations where you guys were unhappy with something, whether it be a storyline or something that went on, and Mr. Fuji kind of shed some of that old man wisdom that, I as a comedian have had that happen where there's a comedy club owner that pisses me off, but a veteran comic will say, all right, no, calm down, handle it this way. Did a lot of that go on with Mr. Fuji?
Well, he not to that extent. When we were with him, everything was going pretty smoothly. That occurred after LOD had come in, and Barry and I both went to Vince, the TV taping, and gave our notice. We told him we weren't happy, and we'd give them a month notice, 2 week, whatever they needed, because we could have got on the phone. I mean, with my relationship with Inoki at that time in New Japan, we could have got on the phone and booked ourselves in Japan, immediately. And there was another time that I had approached Barry. Ole was booking here in Georgia, and that's when Legion of Doom left and went to New York. Well, then there was an opening here in Georgia. We may have had to change our names, like they did up there, but we could have come to Georgia, WCW at the time. So
Yeah.
we gave our notice, and things picked up a little bit for a period of time, but then this stuff happened. So that's what transpired.
I wanted to ask both of you guys, but mainly Bill, because you guys both have had success in Japan and been over there a lot. There's not a lot of information that I could find about Mr. Fuji himself in Japan. Did he have much of a career over in Japan? Any experiences with being over there with him?
I don't, to be honest with you, I don't know, because the Japanese offices are pretty tight.
Mm-hmm.
They have, of course, all Japanese talent. So it would, to bring somebody over who really wasn't a full-blooded Japanese, they want to bring foreigners in. They want to bring Americans and Canadians and Europeans and Australians and New Zealanders in to go against their guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they want to jumpstart somebody, they'll send them to the United States, put them in a territory, get publicity for them in Texas or Georgia or Mid-Atlantic or Minneapolis or California, and then they become international stars and come back. So
Mm-hmm.
Fuji, being of Japanese heritage, it would probably been more difficult for him to go to Japan as a half Japanese. Follow me?
Gotcha. No, and it's interesting because that was going to lead me to one of the final stories that I wanted to ask about, and it was another Larry Zbyszko story. He didn't tell me this one personally. I actually found this on a shoot interview that he had done. He told a story about one of the meanest ribs he saw Mr. Fuji pull. And again, you learn over time to take certain things with a grain of salt. Some guys like to talk for shoot interviews, and sometimes guys just genuinely mix up people and characters, but this one sounded pretty wild. It was a flight to Japan that apparently Larry Zbyszko was on with Mr. Fuji, and poor Haystacks Calhoun was on that same flight, and apparently Mr. Fuji thought it was a good idea to put some X-Lax in Haystacks Calhoun's coffee, and there they are, 30,000 feet in the air, flying over the ocean, and they start to see the pain on Haystack's face, and they hear the stomach rumbling, and due to the size of one Haystacks Calhoun, and due to the size, as we talked about in the Andre the Giant episode, those airplane bathrooms, it became kind of interesting for those Japanese flight attendants who had to hold open a garbage bag while Mr. Calhoun relieved himself due to Mr. Fuji's prank. And I was just wondering if that was something that you guys had heard about, or if Larry got the story wrong, if maybe it happened to somebody else.
I don't know. I mean, that sounds like something Fuji would do. So I wouldn't discount the story.
I never heard that story before. So Fuji never told us that.
No.
Yeah, it's wild. What it was interesting though, Mr. Fuji did go on, like we had talked about, to manage Yokozuna. Barry, at that time, you had been the repo man. You were there, and then you went off to WCW.
Yeah.
Bill, you had gone on to Japan. Did you guys kind of keep in touch with him at all over the years, or did you guys lose touch after that original WWE run ended?
Well, we like I said, we saw him at a signing, and I don't know how long it was. It was a number of years later.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was in the Meadowlands, right, Barry?
Yep, it was a Meadowlands, yeah.
And he was there, and his boy was with him and helping him. And he was sitting right beside us, but he didn't recognize us. He had dementia.
Yeah.
And it was sad because we had so many things we wanted to talk to him about, but he just stared at us, and he couldn't put two and two together who we were.
Yeah, and the one thing about Fuji that a lot of people don't know about is he really was a nice guy. When we were traveling with him, he was a good friend of ours, and he talked about his daughter and son all the time.
Yeah.
And when we flew into Knoxville, he brought us over to his house, and he was just so proud of them. And it's kind of funny because you never hear those stories about him.
No, you don't.
Yeah, and he was a really nice guy. And what really made Fuji the happiest, though, is, remember, Bill, it was you, me, Tonga, Haku, and him. Like we'd fly into San Francisco and we'd go to a sushi bar. and all four of us sitting, eating, I don't know how many servings of sushi a piece and everything, but that was the highlight of Fuji's life. If he didn't do anything else but went out to dinner and did that kind of stuff, that made Fuji. I mean, he was a good guy.
Do you remember the favorite restaurant? I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, I'm saying he loved the business. He felt comfortable around the guys. And I think even though he would pull ribs on people, he still respected the guys.
Well, even during his Hall of Fame induction in 2007, he was introduced and inducted, I should say, by Don "The Rock" Baracco. And, it's interesting because for me as a young kid watching Mr. Fuji, late 80s through the early 90s, he seemed so much older than he actually was. And I think it was, a lot of it was because of the way that he walked and he was in a lot of pain and stuff like that. But in 2007, which had been about 11 years after his last WWE appearance, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he had a couple minutes where he spoke, and it was kind of hard to understand him, but if you leaned in, you could make it out. And he was talking about some of his ribs and ribbing Tanaka when they worked together and whatnot. But it was amazing to me to see that this guy had this glow about him, and he had this big smile, and he was waving to the fans. And they even tried to give him a little bit of a send-off at the end of his run, because at that point, Yokozuna had turned face, had dropped Jim Cornette, and then they had Mr. Fuji come out with Yoko with the American flag, and he was waving it. And at that point, I had read that was when he knew his time was up in WWE. He was having trouble getting in and out of the ring. But it's amazing that this guy could have that character of the evil, devious one. And you do forget that beneath all of that, there's a kind, fun-loving man, and he passed away in August of 2016 at the age of 82 and was survived by 7 children, 13 grandchildren, and this was mind-blowing, 12 great-grandchildren. So to hear you guys talk about the human side of Mr. Fuji is really, really nice to hear, and I can only imagine. I think the best way to wrap this up is if you remember some of the Chinese restaurants in some of the cities. Are there any that stand out? Like, where were you in New York? What was the best? What was Mr. Fuji's go-to in New York? Do you remember?
Well, we didn't go downtown New York. Okay. We'd go in and out, but I don't remember the names of them.
Okay.
But you name a city and we were there.
Yeah, because
I'm sure there was a couple of them named the China Buffet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can only imagine just being at a Chinese buffet and looking up and seeing Ax, Smash, and Mr. Fuji right there, getting the hot and sour chicken. That would blow my mind. But guys, we're having so much fun. We're going to wrap this up. Also, though, this is the Demolition Podcast. It's Ax and Smash. So this doesn't mean that we're never going to talk about Mr. Fuji again. If this episode inspires you or reminds you of any ribs or any questions that you may have, we have Ax and Smash every week, and we can ask them to confirm or deny, although I do believe that there may have been some shenanigans they were involved in. Maybe over time that'll come out. I'm not buying entirely that these guys weren't involved in some of the stuff, especially Barry, knowing he was friends with Curt Hennig too. I don't know how you could be friends with Curt Hennig and Mr. Fuji and not be a prankster yourself. I'm not buying it, Barry. I'm sorry.
I just shook my head and just was like, I have no part of this.
Smart answer, sir. Smart answer. But don't forget, guys, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow all the Instagram pages. The main one is Search and Destroy You. That's Barry, Smash, and Bill Ax together. That's their Demolition page. We also have one just for the podcast itself. It's Demolition Pod. I'm at Ryan Maher Comedy, Ryan Maher Comedy. We're working hard on this. We're going to have a lot more stuff coming out over the next couple of weeks. We want you guys to subscribe to the YouTube, share it on Spotify, let everybody know on social media that Ax and Smash have their own podcast. Guys, you got anything that you want to plug coming up?
Well, we're off this weekend, so we can relax, and
nice.
We'll plug some things as they appear.
Good.
So we are up there just north of Montreal, coming up here pretty soon for Tommy Ferrero, the 80s Wrestling Con up there.
Yes.
Yeah. That's going to be a big one. I don't know exactly who else is on the card, but that's going to be a great one.
Oh,
Well,
Slaughter's there, and Tito. There's a whole bunch of guys up there. Rougeau's. Yeah.
Yep. The All-American boys, the Rougeaus. And I'm actually hoping that we can get some video of them singing their theme song. I think that would be an entertaining time. I think, talk about polar opposites in theme songs, Demolition and the Rougeaus. I mean, that's some wild stuff right there. But we're going to wrap it up right now. We had a great time talking about Mr. Fuji. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on Instagram, Demolition Pod. Ax Smash on Facebook. I keep forgetting about that one. That one's doing really well as well. 80swrestlingcon.com. All the great stuff that's going to be coming up. I'm Ryan Maher. That's Ax Smash. We'll see you guys real soon.
Thanks, Ryan. See you later. See you, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Here comes the axe.